Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 311 Synergy webinar for February 26th. And today's webinar will be about new technology success stories. I would like to hear, I know many of us would like to hear about new technologies that are available for 311 and have wondered, okay, how are the other 311 industries investing in this time? Well, we have two great success stories. We have Andre Williams, who is currently with the New York 311. He's the IVR and IT risk director. And also we have Andy Maimoni, I'm sorry about that, Andy, from the city of San Francisco, and he is the Deputy Director of 311 Customer Service. I'm excited to hear about the stories that each of you have and the new technologies. I just want to give you a little overview of who we are and what we do when it relates to the 301 Synergy Group. We are an industry networking group on LinkedIn. There is a lot of information, sharing, education, fun, and this group is open to all municipalities with the interest in 301. Our 2015 chairperson is Robert Duncan, Customer Service Manager for the City of Austin. Let us remember to mark our calendars for our wonderful conference, which is scheduled for April 27th through May 1st, and actually that says April 26th through the 28th at Charlotte Convention Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the CS Week, with 3 full days packed with discussions and information exchanged. Also through the and also again we have the 301 LinkedIn Synergy Group, and hope you all can make it. Before we get started with our presentation, our first presenter, Andre Williams, I would like to welcome you all to go ahead and upload your questions in the all participants in the panel that's at the bottom of your screen. We will address those questions at the end of the session, where we do have question and answers allocated at the end. With that being said, I will turn it over to Andre from the City of New York 311. Andre?
Thank you for the introduction, Cheryl, and hello and welcome to everybody that's tuned in. Always a pleasure to share the New York City 311 story, especially with some of our sister municipalities and 311 entities. When telling the story about New York City 311, I always like to start with the history of what took place prior to. So what you'll see here on the next slide is what happened in New York City prior to 311 being established. So we had over 40 agency call centers. So a quick example would be if you had a pothole in the street, you would call the Department of Transportation. If there was an issue with a fire hydrant, you would call what we call our Department of Environmental Protection to handle that. And each call center was kind of self-run. There was no standard in terms of hours of operation, in terms of customer service. And to get these numbers, you typically have to go to the phone book. We had a section at the back of the phone book, and there was also something called a green book. Kind of predates me, but there was also a green book that had some of these listings for over these 40 agencies in which you could get government services from. Again, multiple inconsistent hours, so maybe one was 9 to 5, maybe one was 8 to 4, maybe one closed early on Fridays, but again, the information wasn't easily accessible. Different SLAs, they were, once again, independently operated. They kind of operated as silos. No closed-loop process, no common practices for customer service, self-reported results, and these results were not always easily accessible to the public. So what happened in 2002 with our previous mayoral administration, then Mayor Bloomberg started this initiative here in New York City. And moving on to the next slide, you'll see what our mission is and what we stand for. So first thing is accessibility. So moving away from these 40 different agency call centers, and pages in the phone book and the green book, we wanted a quick and easy access to all New York City government services with the highest level of customer service. Government and customer service back in those days didn't always go hand in hand, so we definitely want to take this opportunity to highlight customer service in accessing New York City 311. Accountability. One way to think of this would be let 311 handle the customer service side and the intake side of any request and information that a constituent may have, and then let the agency, the responding agency, be responsible for the actual action to take place, whether it's filling that pothole or fixing that leaky fire hydrant and things of that nature. They deal with the action, we'll deal with the intake and the friendly face over the phone. Transparency. So going back to what I stated before, information wasn't always easily accessible. We wanted to be very transparent with the action that was taking. We post all our information and data online. You can see what's happening in your particular area in terms of type of complaints, requests, and so on. So definitely want to add a level of transparency here in New York City. As we move into the next slide, we'll kind of talk about our model here. So single source for non-emergency government services and information, 24/7 by 365 days. What I like to say is that we never close, even through some emergency situations, some natural disasters, snowstorms, and so forth. We've always been open with an agent ready to talk to for whatever service somebody may need. Access to 180 languages. So as you can imagine, New York City being very diverse culturally, we'd like to offer services to anyone who's comfortable in speaking a second language. So there is an outside vendor that provides that support for us. But once again, for anybody who's not comfortable speaking English, over 180 languages are supported here in our call center. Layered IVR greeting. So not to get too deep into this, but what we have is we start with some broadcast messaging, which alleviates a good portion of the volume that comes into the call center. After hearing the initial broadcasting message, you'll go into what we call our language options. So not that we offer 180 languages on the IVR, but we do offer about 6 languages on the IVR. So if you're comfortable in Spanish, Russian, I believe Creole and Korean are some of the examples that we use, you can opt into those languages and hear some additional messaging before getting to a representative. After that section of the IVR, you'll then enter what we call the NLU, Natural Language Understanding IVR, in which you can speak your intent and you can get routed and serviced as appropriate. Our staff, over 350 plus service professionals. I want to say just over half of that are actually call takers. Everybody else is there to support the call takers like myself. Over 4,000 services are offered, and that kind of crosses city, state, and some federal services. The next bullet point kind of shows 300 city, state, and federal agencies in which we have hold information for. 50,000 calls per day, so we are busy, and quickly approaching 200 million calls sometime soon. I think we have a clock on the wall in which we can kind of see when we're approaching 200 million calls, certainly a landmark milestone for us, I should say. And we have an SLA of 80% of calls should be answered within 30 seconds or less. Through 2013 and through 2014 as well, I believe we're at 83–84%. So as we move into the next slide, let's talk about how we become a contact center. So initially in 2002, we were just a traditional call center, call 311, call 311, call 311, and I'll touch on that a little later as well. But we've expanded to a full-fledged contact center over the years. Starting from the top, we have the call center channel in which you dial 311 or 212 New York if you're not within the 5 boroughs here in New York City. And you go through our IVR, speak to an agent, and so forth. 311 online, followed not too long afterward, so go to our website, nyc.gov, 311 online, to access information, enter request, and so on. We also have a text channel, which is 311-692 or 311-NYC, in which you can get information and engage in a text agent to give you some information. Social media, we have Facebook, Twitter, and I believe there's another account that we have as well. Mobile apps as well, and we've been putting a lot of effort into the mobile app over the last year or so. And we also have live chat, and live chat really supports the online users for those who may need a little assistance in navigating the website or may have some questions that are not easily answered on the website as well. But one thing to keep in mind, I'm sure this is for the other 311 entities as well, there's really 3 outcomes that take place. We either provide information, we can refer you to another agency, or we can take a service request for your particular situation. What I'm very happy to share with you is some of our milestones on our next slide in terms of what each channel is doing. So we're just under 21 million calls received, probably eclipsed that in the last week or so based off of the increased volume with the inclement weather here in New York City. 6.5 million visits to our online page. I'm sorry, this is all for last year, so let me be very clear. 21 million calls for last year, 6.5 million visits to online last year, 118,000 texts, 142,000 followers for our social media, just over 500,000 touches to our mobile app, and just over 12,000 chats that we engage in. I do want to put a quick disclaimer out there for chat. That is still somewhat of a budding pilot program. I'm sure if we were to do the same webinar next year and go over some milestones for 311, that number would be greatly increased as well. But moving on to the next slide, I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that we faced here. And what we did initially with our marketing, we really ingrained 311 into the lifestyle and culture of New York City as the one-stop shop. We were a victim of our own success, and it led to rapid growth that was not a sustainable model. We needed to find a way to kind of handle that and find ways to get people to other channels in terms of saving costs and so on. Technology solutions were at the limits of its capability. Doing anything more with the technology that we have certainly compromises and introduces risk to the technology. It also degrades the customer experience, and again, customer service was big on our in terms of our goals that we wanted to do here. We wanted to make sure that getting to an agent was an easy process, and when we spoke to the agent, it was also a good process. The last bullet point here entrenched the call 311 model into everybody's mindset. So what happened here was that everybody was so used to just dialing the three numbers that it was a little difficult migrating people to go online or to the mobile app or even to social media and so on. So what we kind of find is that instead of the phone channel decreasing, it kind of continued to increase, just not at the rate it was increasing before, but we probably had new people that just used the other channels to engage with 311. So some of the challenges that faced us and what we did, and I'll show you on the next slide, is we had to kind of decide on a solution to get us where we needed to be. So identify and route out-of-jurisdiction calls. So we have some non-government entities here in New York City, and I think the power companies, so we have Con Edison and PSE&G are some good examples of non-government entities in which we have a little information that we transfer to. We have state agencies, so Department of Motor Vehicle would be a good example of that, and of course our federal agencies as well, like the Postal Service. So we needed to kind of route those calls, and we wanted to find a solution that could probably route those calls directly from the IVR as opposed to the agent getting the call, triaging, and then having to route. Let's see if we could find a solution that could have this done automatically. Leverage our existing 311 content. So similar to all the other 311 entities, you realize that people are calling for information or some type of service, so the content is really your best tool that you have, the most powerful tool. Wanted to find a way to leverage that content within the IVR to give some, hopefully, self-service capability and increase resolution rates within the system. Again, reducing the amount of calls that got to reps or leaving the more complex calls to the representative. Enhance the agent experience. I'll touch on this in a little bit more detail in another slide. But what happens here is that the agents prior to did not know what took place in the IVR. They got a phone call, and they really had to start from square one in triaging that phone call. Optimize our skill set routing capabilities. So we do have different skill sets or different queues in which our agents are skill set for, depending on call type, depending on training and so forth. Different agents will be in different types of queues. We want to have a solution that could route to these different queues. So basically understanding the customer's intent in the IVR and routing them to the appropriate agent with the appropriate skill level. And the classic line is, prove that it could work and is it affordable with diminishing budgets. Certainly everybody has a wish list, but can you afford it, and so on. Moving into our next slide, what you'll see here is our natural language solution. So I mentioned NLU, natural language understanding IVR. So looking at the analysis and design aspect, what we did was analyze our top call drivers, identify transactional versus informational type calls, design routing capabilities, and self-service automation. So that kind of goes back to some of the deciding on solution bullet points that I just talked upon. This is what we did in the analysis and design phase in deciding on using the natural language solution. What we realized the solution features kind of met us where our needs were, Natural language call steering. Speak your intent, IVR understands it, and gets you to the appropriate 311 jurisdiction call center, or it gets you to the right agent to handle your requests. Self-service automation, and this is something that we pretty much had no capability of doing unless we really degraded customer experience, but now we could incorporate self-service automation within the IVR. Agent screen pop, so this again talks to enhancing the agent experience. So what would happen is that if a customer spoke their intent in the IVR, that information also traveled to the agent's desktop. They got a screen pop at the same time that the phone call came in. They could see the customer's intent and know exactly what they stated within the IVR. They could actually copy and paste that information into our, what do we use here, CEVO, our customer service management system, to help with assisting and speeding up the call process and searching for the right service for this customer. And robust reporting. So typical to all other call centers, we want to measure everything that moves. The partnership was between 311. We're supported by DoIT, Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. Nuance is the vendor that has this natural language solution, and also our platform partner. So going into the next slide, some of our delivery challenges. And again, going with another classic line, we didn't know what we didn't know. So the first thing that came to light was our technology. We needed to upgrade our entire telecom infrastructure to support this natural language solution. So we kind of had a project before the official project. Probably a good time to upgrade our systems anyway, going into quite a few end-of-lives for certain Microsoft products and so on. So we had to do the work to refresh our systems that would support the system current state and support future versions of the system. Resources, and I'm pretty sure this is a similar thing to the other organizations here in the webinar. We had to use subject matter experts to assist and support, and these resources weren't necessarily dedicated to the project. So yes, you still had to do your regular full-time job, and yes, we would like your assistance in supporting this project. So there was definitely a balancing act, and we certainly appreciate the extra hours and hard work that everybody put into getting this project implemented, and we'll talk about the results in a future slide. Project management. So as I mentioned before, it was really a partnership amongst a few different entities, and project managers may each have their own different style, and a lot of people kind of had to sacrifice certain things for the greater good and so forth. Ultimately, it worked out to be a good marriage, so to speak. Uncharted waters. So in this kind of situation, Nuance, the vendor, didn't have other 301 entities in which they could say, hey, we do this in Dallas, we do this in San Francisco, we do this elsewhere. We were really going into uncharted waters, didn't know what we didn't know, and really didn't have any other government entity to compare it to. Looking at the bottom of the slide, cooperation, collaboration, flexibility, and expertise were kind of the main ingredients here to the success of this. And let's start to talk about results on our next slide. And what we had to do initially was pass the mayor test. So right before the previous administration left office, we got the thumbs up from Mayor Bloomberg and his high-ranking officials. They came to the office, they tested the system, they actually turned it on and turned it off, and gave their thumbs up and gave their blessing for us to put it into production. What we realized is that this solution handles a lot more of the simpler requests as designed, and basic routing to other agencies, taking the customer much closer to the point of service. So as we requested, we wanted to have a solution that could transfer to the outside entities that our agents would do, and also handle some self-service, simple type requests. Let's say you're calling to find out when your garbage days are. Something like that would be handled in the IVR. You wouldn't need to speak to an agent for that. Enable 301 to achieve SLA, so that it goes right back to supporting our 80% 30-second model that we have here, and we saw results right away once implementing the system. Present customer needs to agents. So this goes back to the widget pop-up that I stated before. So the customer service representatives here would get that pop-up that showed the customer intent, and this kind of helped in speeding up the call process overall. We noticed a change in some of our metrics with this information being handled, being presented to the agent before or right at the same time the call is presented. And one of the biggest things here is that it increased our capacity by over 28%. So we were seeing results right away with these external transfers and the self-service modules within the IVR, in which capacity did increase over 20%. Our workforce management team certainly was happy to see that and had to adjust their forecasting models to support the new IVR that was in our system. I also like to state that on some of our busy days, based off of maybe snowstorms and things of that nature, we saw capacity increases of over 25%, approaching 30% as well. So it shows that the system really could handle increased volume and handle simpler type of requests, and let the more complex situations be handled by the representative as designed. Ultimately, a true success story. We've been using the system for over a year. It's an organic system that we continue to enhance and grow, and we have a very good partnership with the vendor Nuance, and we're very well supported by our telecom team and Do It as our partner. I really hope the information I shared here with you helps your organization in your current goals and future goals. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Andy Maimoni over in San Francisco to discuss his text messaging.
Thanks, Andre. Thanks a lot. That's a tough act to follow. I'm Andy Maimoni. I'm the Deputy Director of San Francisco 311. We have been in business since 2007. I joined there in 2008. All of the things that Andre said about, why do 311, what are all the benefits, that's the exact same reason, that we stood up a 311 in San Francisco. And for those of you that have a 311, you were probably all driven by similar metrics. For those of you that don't, these are pretty much common rules, and it's one of the great things about the Synergy Group is you can get together and talk about, the hows and the whys and the whats. Again, for those of you that are thinking about it, I want to kind of echo one thing that Andre said is that you wind up being a victim of your success. So as you do your initial call planning, everyone I've talked to has overshot their call estimates, at launch. And there's two reasons for that. One of them is people are just happy to talk to somebody who is really, really trained in customer service and has customer service as a goal, which is not always present in the departments, and then also just the ease of access. So we also, launched, like I said, we launched in 2007, and our call volume actually peaked in 2008. As Andre was talking about, we did a number of items to increase our self-service ability, and now it's kind of interesting. I was looking at his metrics, and we do currently about 110,000 calls in a month, which Andre will do in 3 days. So I used to think that San Francisco was a busy place. But all right, so moving on to the discussion. So what was our need, and why did we wind up adding text messaging to our toolbox? So the reason we did is we had this need. We had a bunch of people that take advantage of the emergency adult shelters in San Francisco, and the process, as you can see on the slide, was that they would wait outside of a resource center every morning because the resource center would open at 7 o'clock, and they'd try and be first in line. And so to be first in line at 7 in the morning, you need to be out there at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., and that's, in either the wet weather or the cold weather, and, that's just not a good experience. So it came to us from the Human Services Agency and from the Homeless Outreach Team that, could we somehow take the 311 customer service experience, take the 311 processes and wrap those up and put them around this homeless shelter reservation program. So if we take a look at the next slide, what I've done is I've kind of put a flow chart here, and the color codes are the kind of gray-blue boxes are the manual processes, the green boxes are automated. You can see 3 circles, and the 3 circles that are on there are where we are using text messaging. So we implemented text messaging specifically for this process. That doesn't mean that it's the only place we're going to use it. We have on our roadmap things to use it in the future. But whenever you roll out a process, you want to make sure that there's a business need for it, that you're not just trying to implement some kind of technology just because it's out there and it's cool and everyone else is implementing it. There's got to be a design reason for where it's going to fit in your environment. And so this was really our need. Next slide goes over kind of our process and the technology we're going to talk about. And so it's really, the overall process is really pretty simple. We capture the phone number in the form. We use what Lagman refers to as case events, and we also use our business intelligence system to run reports, and those reports all will trigger some kind of a notification. The technology, this is our technology stack, but I really want to say that it can be anything. Any kind of CRM should be able to have triggers, notifications based on events that happen. You know, we're using Microsoft reporting services, but, you know, all you're really doing is running a report. So that can happen, you know, pretty much in any, you know, platform. We use BEA WebLogic, and I say BEA because, yeah, we are actually on the version before it got bought by Oracle, and so it's ancient, but it still has the capabilities to do this. And we're using Twilio as a platform. We'll talk a little more about Twilio as a platform. It's the one that we chose to do text messaging, but there's others out there. What we did is we realized we had this need or a desire to text message our clients. The people that were putting together this program, from talking to the folks on the street, realized that a large percentage of the homeless population actually had some kind of a, you know, prepaid cellular phone because it was their, you know, way of being in contact with the world. There's a lot of people that are homeless that, you know, had really great jobs just a little bit ago. And so the perception of, you know, someone who's homeless and being chronically homeless is not necessarily true. So we got a couple of vendor quotes to implement text messaging, and both of them were, you know, really expensive. To us, they were like $60,000, $70,000 with ongoing maintenance costs of like $20,000 a year, which for our budget was a lot of money. I know a lot of the folks on the call are from smaller cities, and same thing. That's a lot of a chunk of money to take out for a small project. And so if I go back, and we've got the technology stack here, the thing that is key is if you're doing any kind of integration at all. So if you're working and sending cases to Public Works, you're sending cases to animal care and control through any kind of integration. If you're integrated with anybody at all, you can probably add text messaging to the integration relatively easily. So if you're not integrated to anybody, then yeah, this is probably a technology step that's a little bit bigger. But if you're pushing cases to anyone, it may not be as big of a reach as you think. So again, why do we pick Twilio? Twilio communicates with just about every single cell phone carrier out there in the world. A lot of cell phone companies will let you send an email, like I've got Verizon, and I know that I can send an email to Verizon using my cell phone address, and it will give me a text message, but it doesn't tell me if there was a failure or success, and there's no way for people to respond or reply to that text. Right now, we're not processing those responses, but we didn't want to use something that, you know, would be just kind of a one-sided, you know, plan. So it lets us send and receive, and it's also really, really cheap. I mean, the email to text is free, but it also has problems. So it's, you know, less than a penny to send, less than a penny to receive. Our entire text messaging, you know, budget for last month, or our expenses, is we spent $13 sending and receiving text messages. So it's affordable, and so it's a way of adding a service that really is affordable. So let's talk about the process. So if we go to the next slide, is the idea is people can call 311 to make a reservation request. And we wanted to make it easy for someone to go ahead and make a reservation request and get out of that line. That was like the big thing. Make so don't have to wait in line. And then how do we get confirmation back to the people in the streets? Because they don't, you know, they're not going to be able to, you know, walk away from a center with a piece of paper. So the idea is you can go, you can call, and we'll let them write down information that will help them track their request, like their service request number. On the next slide, I talk about how we structure it. So we want to make sure that we capture the format correctly, that we got 10 digits, and they were properly formatted. A lot of times if you have a text phone number field, people will put in 10 digits directly, some will use parentheses, some will space, some will dot, and so we really wanted to format it correctly for the purposes of the messaging. We do use a opt-in button. We want to make sure that we've communicated to them that there are going to be charges for text messages and that it's an opt-in feature. So we just ask a simple question is it a cell phone, and do you want to receive text messages? Again, you always want to make sure that you're delivering a service that is what they want. What's also on the form is a reminder for the customer service rep, for the CSR, to ask them, okay, if you don't have a phone, are you aware of what's called the Lifeline service? And I'm not sure if this is in other states or not, but in California, the Public Utilities Commission has a Lifeline service that enables a phone credit for low-income individuals. And so if the individual does not have a phone, we take the time and we inform them about this Lifeline service in the hopes that maybe they can get a phone. So again, it's all about the 3-in-1 experience of providing a complete end-to-end service. And so this is just one more way we bring it in. So where do we use the text messaging? So on the next slide, what happens is every morning we take the request from the previous day, we conduct the lottery, we give them a seniority number, and if the clients have opted in to messaging, they're going to get a message like the one there. So it's, hi, Andy Maimoni, you are currently number 740 on the shelter reservation wait list, and your 3-in-1 service request number is, whatever. So it's like a digital receipt. So the next morning, they'll get a confirmation of where they are on the list, what their service request number is, and it gives them a sense of existence. It really lets them know that they've been validated. From a technology standpoint, it's really pretty simple. We run a report, and we have 3 fields that come off the report, which are the position on the list, the name, and the service request number. And those just get plugged into a template and get dropped off to the integration server. If the individual doesn't have a phone, but they have an email, we'll do the same thing. On an email, we have a slightly different message because it can have more characters. But the concept is, pretty simple, is you figure out what your message needs to be, you run a report, you generate a template, and you hand it off to the server. And with all of the text messaging and all the emails, we also write back into the CRM so that the CSR knows that the message was sent, and it was sent successfully. Or to let us know, hey, this phone number was bad, and then we can try and find out what's up with it. If the person calls back the next day and says, I didn't get my text message, we say, well, here's a phone number I have, and it came back as a failure. So it's a way of, again, doing that, that loop. So the next notification we do is on eligibility for a reservation. So every day we find out how many shelter beds are available. And what we do is Legan has a concept of queues, and we take the clients and we move them from the waitlist queue to the reservation queue. And when they move to the reservation queue, again, we pick up this trigger in the CRM, and we pass that message off to the integration server. So again, the message would be, Anna, you are at the top of the shelter reservation wait list. Call 3-in-1 right away with your SR about your request for a 90-day reservation. So again, a clear message, 140 characters. In this one, all we're really doing is we're taking the name and the service request number, because the position on the wait list by now doesn't matter. They're close enough to the top of the wait list that if they call us, we will go ahead and have a room for them. And then they actually have 10 days to call us and confirm that reservation, or we'll wind up moving them into, if you want to call it, a declined queue or something like that. So on the next slide, it's an example of how we close the loop. So what we've done now is, we've either had the person call us or we reach them, and they contacted us, and we said, great, okay, you've got a room or a bed. It's not a room, it's a bed. And so we will go back into our form, and we'll indicate the shelter where they have the reservation, the bed number, their section, and we'll take that information and we will send that back out to them. Again, it's a digital reservation conservation, and in this case, it has an ID number, which is the actual ID number of their, it's their ID in our homeless, in our human resources or other human services management system. So that's their ID, where their bed is confirmed, again, section of bed, confirmation that the reservation is for today, because if they don't show up today, they will lose that reservation by the arranged check-in time. And that's because shelters have slightly different check-in times, and they can also say, I can't get there by 6, can I come by 7 or 8? And we can make a note in the reservation so they can arrive late. So rather than try and figure out what that time is, it's just a reminder in the text message that, okay, your reservation's today, but you got to get there, in time. So we've found that this is really, a great, process. We needed a process that was limited in scope where we could prototype this text messaging. And again, if you're going to try and roll out some new technology, you want to have some degree of measurable success. Like what Andre said, is they found a 20% increase in ability to handle calls through their IVR. 20% is a lot. When you're handling 50,000 calls a day, 20% is huge. For us, it was great because it met our need of giving our clients, some kind of, digital reservation, because we're no longer going into a center and walking out with a piece of paper. So looking at what your needs are, trying to find the right technology to match your needs, and delivering it in a scope that that's measurable and achievable. So wrapping up, next slide. I think most CRM systems have the ability to look at 3 basic things that are of interest to the public. Case creation, a change in status of that case, did it get dispatched, what's going on with it, and then obviously the case resolution. And that's really what we're doing here, is we're notifying them that their case not only got created, but they got on the wait list, and they've got a number they can follow up on, that there's been a change in status, that they're no longer on the wait list, they're actually in a queue for reservations. And then finally, that it's a closed loop system, you've got your reservation, here it is, and here's your shelter information. So text messaging, lots of options out there. It's worth looking at. If you have an integration already with anybody, it's probably not a huge step to add in outbound text messaging. And in our experience, it's worked really, really well. So that's it on text messaging from us, and I will pass it back to Cheryl for questions.
Thank you, Andy and Andre, for great presentations. Now we are up to questions, so if you do have questions that you would like to ask Andy and Andre, please upload them in the QA panel to all participants so that everyone will be able to get those. We do have a few questions already. For Andre, what has some of the public reactions been with the implementations of the new system?
Certainly, thank you. Great question. What I typically would say in a situation like this is that New Yorkers don't tend to call up and say, hey, great system, love the experience. So the best way for us to measure this is that we have not seen any increase in customer complaints after we implemented the system. So there are a few channels in which we do allow our customers to voice their opinion, good, bad, or indifferent, and we monitor those on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And we really paid attention to it once we implemented the system, daily, like even almost by the hour, to see if there was any complaints about, say, misrecognition within the IVR system. We also tuned into our reps and asked if anybody makes any comment about the IVR, please let us know. We'll go back and listen to the phone call. But really, after such a radical change in our IVR culture, there really wasn't any increase in complaints. It was, I think it was very well received, and people really gotten used to it and have embraced it.
Thank you. Another question for you, Andre. Were there any unexpected positive results from the NLU?
Certainly. So with respect to capacity, we didn't expect 20% and up to 25% to be the number. So what happened is that after realizing what our baseline is and the increased capacity, we're able to do other supporting activities in our call center, like increased training and up-training and getting our reps up to speed in different and new initiatives that may be coming here in the program. So that was definitely a nice to have, that the capacity allowed us to do other supporting activities here in the call center. Certainly happy about that, and the reps are happy, and our workforce management team is definitely happy about it as well.
Thank you so very much. I do have a few questions for you, Andy, as well. The first question is that you said you added text messaging primarily to notify the homeless. What percentage of the users have cell phones and email?
That was actually a pretty good surprise to us, is we found that by the time you took text messages or your text messaging system or an email, that over half of the people had electronic contact information. And so it's a way of them staying connected with what's going on in the world. So yeah, it's a good surprise for us. But yeah, over half of them have the ability to communicate using those services.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. And another question for you. What do you think may be the next use for your text messaging?
I think the next use is kind of where we prototyped it here, is expanding out the notifications to other services. Being able to say, okay, your service request was resolved, giving people a status change. So many people log a request and they don't feel like there's a closed loop mechanism. So I think that's really the main thing, is giving people to know what's going on without having to go back and worry about it. And then they can get the text message and go back and check and hopefully validate that the work was or wasn't done. And so maybe allow closed loop feedback so they can reply back, yes, it is or isn't. But starting to look at the two-way text messaging as well. But right now it's just probably expanding out the case status and resolution to more of the work types.
Okay, awesome. And a question for Andy and Andre, and each of you can kind of take turns on that. How have your agents responded to utilizing the new technologies?
Okay, I guess I'll jump in. As far as the widget pop, that would be the real interface that the agents have with the new technology in the IVR. And they embraced it right away. To share a little quick joke, we call it they've been widgetized. And it kind of resonated with us here during our customer service week for the agents in last October. So getting that information, and it just really prepares them better to handle the call. They're able to copy and paste the information from the widget and put it right into our CRM system and get results even quicker and so on. And it changes the opening as well, where you would go from a standard opening, hello, thank you for calling 311, this is Andre, how may I help you, to, okay, I see that you're calling about a pothole, and how can I further assist you? They've really embraced it, and it's been one of the success stories for this whole natural language project.
That's great. On our side, what our agents like is it's knowing that they're getting the message out to a group of people that are really in need, and it's work that's taken off their plate because they're not trying to make an outbound call, or they're not manually creating an email or a text message. It's all happening via automation. It's all logged in the system. So they just really appreciate the increased level of communication with the clients and the fact that it's done seamlessly for every single request.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I believe that was the last question that we actually have for you all. First of all, I would like to thank Andre and Andy for your presentation. The information you provided was great, and it gives our cities things to talk about when we come into new technologies and the successes you guys have had. Just remember that the webinar recording and PDFs on the CS Week's website and the 301 Synergy webinar will be located later this afternoon or later today. Hopefully, Amber will get that set up for us. And again, thank you for looking at the 301 Synergy Group. And you can find us on LinkedIn. And currently there are approximately 250 members from all over the U.S. as well as Canada. And again, we're excited and hope to see you guys all out in Charlotte, North Carolina for our 301 Synergy Conference, which is scheduled for April 26th through 28th. And again, thank you for joining the session today. And again, we were excited to hear about your success stories with your new technologies for 301. Thank you and have a great day.